Hey y'all, it's Rick here with Uncommon Communion, coming at you on a Friday night, fairly late. And I'll be honest with you, y'all, two things. One is, of course, I am recording a video rather than writing. It's because I'm really tired. And the second thing is, I wasn't even sure I was going to be able to make this recording tonight. I was dozing as I tried to do some reading a little while ago. But I washed the dishes and got a second wind, and I think I have enough juice left in my orange, enough gas left in my tank to give it at least a little bit of time here with you. So let us begin as we always begin by recognizing, realizing, affirming, and celebrating that we are always and everywhere in the holy presence of the more and each other. So, what was the exhausting icing on the top of a tiring cake of the week was a really nice event and a something I was really glad, even though, of course, at the end of a busy week, I taught 4 days, did trainings 4 days face to face this week, and that was a lot. I was tired, and I'll be honest with you, I would have preferred to just come home and take a nice long nap and put my feet up this Friday evening, Friday afternoon, Friday evening. But I was glad that I went to an opportunity that I get from time to time. I think I've shared here before about, I guess I could call him a friend. His name is Jake. He's a chef, and uh, he is so awesome at being a private chef that he gets hired to do different jobs. Different. It's not really catering. It's sort of more fancy, of course, than that. Basically, private dinners, right? And I've worked with him a number of times over the years. And a few years ago, he invited me, hired me to serve a post wedding day brunch at his home as they were celebrating one of his sister's wedding. And when he called me up, sent me a text, who makes phone calls anymore, right? And asked if I could help this evening for his dad's retirement party, I was very happy to say yes, even though I knew it would come at the end of a very full week. And what I didn't know that actually turned out to be really cool, uh, I sort of assumed when he, asked me that it would just be similar to what it was before in his parents' home, which was lovely and very nice. It wasn't. It was in a park, in a party shelter pavilion, quite nice pavilion, park that I like, not too terribly far from home. And the evening was lovely. The food was good. His family is just so nice. And I was just so grateful. And I know they were grateful that myself and a friend of a friend were also serving there. And it made some, some pretty good money too. So I can't complain. I can't complain. What I wanted to share about though, and what continues to vex me, I guess, and this isn't a criticism at all of any of the things this evening, any of the people or any of the, the event. It was a retirement party and really lovely. I am just, I get these moments where I look at what is going on in our country, the fascism that is rising, and the continued cover up, massive cover up, incredible cover up that we're seeing with T. Rump, Maxwell, Epstein files. And I'll get to that here in a moment. There were some new developments with that today. The just what we are seeing, the craziness. And, how do I juxtapose that against a gathering like this, where people are talking and they're having a good time and, it's business as usual, you know? And again, I'm not being critical of, any of the people or the event. It just is hard for me to, kind of understand like how bad do things in the country have to get before not saying people cancel an event like this. I'm not saying that at all. But how bad do things have to get before, people feel personally impacted? This group of people, right? Who are well off and not rich, but educated and definitely middle class, upper middle class, comfortable. Um, how bad do things have to get before an impact of the situation is felt in gatherings like this? You know, um, certainly one could imagine things could get really bad and martial law, and you would have to cancel an event like this, right? Because people weren't allowed to go out, right? I imagine a different group, right? And I know these pavilions in these parks are rented by families of immigrants to celebrate, and imagine if it was a Hispanic family celebrating a retirement or some kind of a party, there would be a whole different vibe, because that is a community that is being affected right now by this fascism. I was thinking about other times in American history, when a group like this might have, really been impacted. And what came to mind was the Vietnam War. I imagine that even though many of the soldiers who were drafted were of lower socioeconomic, because, like the wealthy, the well off, the Donald Trumps of the world, who could, say they had bone spurs multiple times to avoid being drafted, a gathering similar to what I was serving at tonight would be, there would be people there who had loved ones in Vietnam, who had lost loved ones in Vietnam, who were afraid of loved ones going to Vietnam. That was clearly a period where a gathering like this would have been impacted. But, again, it just feels like business as usual in the places that I go. And I'm honestly torn with this, and I would appreciate if there's any comments people have about how you feel in seeing what I imagine you're also seeing as you go about your life. There's also this part of me that is like, we have to enjoy celebrations. We have to enjoy family. We have to, enjoy those moments. And I'm all in favor of that. We have to feed ourselves so that when the time comes, that we have to be resilient, we have to be strong, we have to be bold, we have to be courageous, that we're going to have the ability to do that because of these connections, these families, these networks, that were on display in this gathering. So I definitely see that angle and that aspect, and that makes sense, you know. And then I also, think about, I am one who does read, dystopian tales, novels, and watches things like Andor, as I've said, which isn't really dystopian, but it is about fascism and how it rises, and the impact of that. And again, I wonder, if this plan, the Project 2025 that we're seeing unfolding more and more every day, which is really to undermine the Constitution, to change the foundational structure of this nation that so many of us, all of us at that retirement party this evening, take for granted. We just assume it's going to be there. And if suddenly that's not there and things look very different or even somewhat different, how does it impact a party like this? Do we become so financially unstable that we can't afford something like this? Do parks close because of cuts in funding? I mean, it's kind of hard to really imagine, but I'm trying to, and just wondering, lots of wondering. Yeah. One final thought before we close, and I think this is key, even looking at the events of the nation today. Today we saw three things that I think, again, are all part of this distraction narrative that we have to be vigilant against. We know for certain that T-Rump is all over the Epstein files, the hundreds of thousands of pages of them. And the distractions keep coming. what did they do today? Sent the FBI to investigate someone who has been tremendously critical of T-Rump, and raided his home. And, obviously a judge had to sign to get that warrant. But I heard one commentator say that, it's a very low bar and you can judge shop, to do something like that. So, maybe there is something legit that they were looking for. Very likely there wasn't, because it seems like, a revenge action and a message sent to others that if you stand up and criticize dear leader, dear dictator, that this can happen to you, right? And then later in the day, we also got the transcripts from when Trump's personal lawyer went to Florida and spoke with the convicted sex trafficker, Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted perjurer. She's been convicted twice for lying in court, right? And they released the transcripts for that today. And it is really something to hear that and to just hear the lies. It's so clear that she is lying and downplaying, because we know facts. We know about how she introduced Trump to Epstein. And she's in the transcript, she's saying things like, I don't really know. I mean, I kind of sort of remember. I mean, it's just all bullshit. Again, sorry for my language. But they're releasing this to try to distract, to try to say, well, she obviously didn't say anything, to incriminate Trump, but but the lies in there are just staggering and stunning. And meanwhile, the James Comer, who is the person in the House, I believe, who has subpoenaed the Epstein files, got some of those today, and we'll see what happens with that. And we'll see if those are disclosed and what's in there. I will say one interesting thing, and this will be my last point before we close with a prayer. One thing that are not in the transcripts, and I think this is telling, there was concern that when the conversation between Trump's former defense lawyer and second at the DOJ, that there would be other names that would come out, right? That Maxwell would put all these other names of Trump's enemies, Clinton, Bill Clinton, and others. But that hasn't come out, and that didn't today. Maybe that will later. But, the fact that those didn't come out, to me, shows that there's even a bigger cover up here. Because it's not just T. Rump that doesn't want the names of the child rapists who went to places, Jeffrey Epstein's private isle, his plane, and other places that we have well documented. With the children, the girls that Maxwell procured through grooming and other, horrible, horrible deception and manipulation and criminality. Those other people, their names haven't been disclosed either. And I think, that could be part of what's going on here, is it's not just T. Rump protecting himself. It is a whole network seeking mutual protection. Because here's the thing, y'all, when the files come out, and I really do believe they will come out at some point, probably sooner rather than later, and I still have my ideas about where they're going to come from. Keep an eye on Dan Bongino, number 2 at the FBI. There is, I heard some talk from a good source here on Substack, an insider who says that Elon Musk has been reaching out to Bongino to try to see if they can together do something with the knowledge that Bongino has. And you'll remember that Musk was the first one, really, who opened this can of, thinking of the movie There's Something About Mary, this can of whoop ass, right? You remember that reference, the can of whoop ass against Trump. By saying that, Trump is in the Epstein files, and that's what got all this stirred up. And it's interesting that, because I think Bongino is the one that's gonna break this, because he knows it and he has it. So, all right, y'all, this was actually longer than I expected. I guess I got a little bit of a second wind burst here. always appreciate your watching, listening, sharing. Please send comments. Let me know what you think. And we'll close with the Serenity Prayer. I like to say the we version to remember that we're in this together. And God grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, not ours, be done. All right, y'all, do plan to write for Sunday. That will be the gospel. It's a favorite of mine. It's a good one, very physical one this Sunday. And we'll see you then. Blessing and good. Be gentle. Be well.